everyone, and welcome to another book review. Today I am going to be reviewing Return to Fukushima by Rebecca Bathory. This photography collection offers a really interesting glimpse into the exclusion zone of the 2011 Fukushima Daiichi nuclear power plant disaster. So I'm going to review this photography collection, show some photographs that I found particularly moving and meaningful, and discuss my thoughts on this photography collection. So the photography collection is photography from a 2016 trip that the author/photographer took to the exclusion zone. She was able to gain access, and that is a quite difficult thing to do in the Fukushima Daiichi exclusion zone. At least that is my understanding, and the time this book was written in 2016. So unlike other areas that have experienced nuclear disaster, particularly Pripyat with Chernobyl, the area is very untouched. At least it was in 2016 when these photographs were taken. The photography is interspersed with quotes from survivors, as well as a narration of the author's personal experience traveling to the exclusion zone and things that she saw and experienced and thought about the photography that she was taking. So all of this is mixed into one photography collection that is really difficult to get through in a certain sense. The photography here in this photography collection is not like other photography collections that I have reviewed on this channel, ones that maybe document a rock climbing expedition or the beauty of a particular continent or of other interesting, fun, beautiful aspects of the world. This photography collection is designed to document disaster and the aftermath of disaster, and for that reason it's not quite as much of a fun photography collection as an important and meaningful photography collection that really documents the fallout of a nuclear power plant disaster, as well as the consequences that can happen when we're not careful with nuclear power. So I do want to start this off with a little bit of a content warning. This photography collection does showcase dead animals, which I think could be disturbing to some people. I'm not going to show you those photographs in this review, do not worry. But I also want to say the author makes it very clear that you will be seeing these photographs and you get a good sense when they're coming up in the book, so you're not surprised by it, but I understand that could be shocking or kind of upsetting to some people. So if you don't want to see that, just know that going in before you purchase a copy of this book, I will not be showing those photographs to you in this review, so you can rest easy. But if that's too disturbing for you, maybe just enjoy this review and don't purchase the collection for yourself. So now, with that little content warning aside, let's jump in. I think the photography in this, because the area is so untouched in comparison to other areas that have had longer to have had humans come in and move things, think Pripyat, the photography is just that much more moving and meaningful because you can really see the upheaval. I think there's two aspects to the upheaval that are shown in the photography. One of them is just the raw power of disaster, the earthquake, the tsunami, the aftershocks that occurred, that just has the raw power to damage what humans have built and think is so strong. One of the key things that went wrong during this disaster was a record tsunami that crossed the flood wall, at least that's my understanding. There was a disaster, an unprecedented disaster, which just blew through everything man-made. So we do have this aspect that's shown in the photography of like twisted metal on a beach or a fallen down telephone pole with all the wires. And I think those show the raw power of nature really well and that aspect of the disaster. But there's another aspect of the photography which doesn't necessarily show a car that's been twisted into pieces, but it shows a life that's been interrupted in a way that could be kind of hard to convey. And I think, again, because it's such an untouched region, or it was at this time, it feels especially painful, I'm not sure if that's the word I'm looking for, to see a life quite literally interrupted on a random day with no planning and no understanding that things were going to fundamentally change. So the photography does fall into these two categories. One of them is just the raw power of nature. So I will show you some photographs that show you that. For example, we have what appears to be a vending machine, and is that a car? Just twisted pieces of metal. This is in that category which showcases, trying not to get the glare here, that showcases the raw power of tsunami, earthquake, aftershocks, that aspect of the disaster. So this is, when in my head I was classifying this as twisted metal. So we do have that aspect. Here's another one, down photography, or down power wires, showing just the raw power of Mother Nature, for lack of a better word, against what humans have built. This is an aspect of the photography. It's something that happened. It was part of the disaster story in and of itself. Making sure those were the ones I marked. Yes. Next we have the life interrupted part. And I think the life interrupted parts are the ones that kind of hit harder because they are the ones that kind of show that this really came out of nowhere and there really wasn't any warning that this was coming, and how quickly life changed for people in an instant. So here's a photograph of bikes that have literally been grown over with the vegetation here because it's just been so long. And you just get the sense that people parked their bikes here assuming they were going to collect them in a couple hours or at the end of the workday or whatever happened for people to park their bikes here, and they never went and got them. Obviously, I'm kind of over explaining the photo at this point, but you just get the sense that life has been interrupted from this photo. There are two areas that I find particularly strong with the life interrupted theme. There's photographs of businesses that have been interrupted, supermarkets, bookstores, DVD stores, that just show how things have just stopped in these stores. Life stopped on March 11, was it March? Someday in March 2011. And those are interesting, but I feel like there's an aspect of me that has seen an abandoned business before for a variety of reasons. So it's not necessarily, it doesn't really showcase the raw power. It's life interrupted, but the more powerful aspect of life interrupted for me is the pictures of these schoolhouses. The schools literally look like students were probably just right there, and they've dropped everything. And it's like someone's waiting for the children to come back in from like a recess or from a class trip or something, but they're never going to come back. Or even if these kids were to come back to this place eventually someday, which I believe is the ultimate goal of the Japanese government, like they're not going to go back to their 3rd grade classroom or their 4th grade classroom. Now, that kind of gives a haunting, I'll show the photographs of the classrooms. Sorry for the glare. And I think that aspect of like someone has just stepped out, but they haven't really. We know that there was a disaster which forced these people to evacuate and leave. Kind of lends it a little bit of a haunting air. This is a particularly interesting photograph for me. We see all the shoes at what I assume is a school, just piled. I don't know if they were left here or they were knocked here or what happened with these shoes, but we have all these shoes that have been piled here. And this is kind of one of those where even if these kids were to return, these shoes are never going to be used again. And it kind of has this air of, it feels like in these school pictures that a key part of childhood has been interrupted that can never be, you can't really get back on those tracks once it's been interrupted in this way. I'm sure these kids went on to attend schools and other school districts, but to see the schoolhouses just interrupted in the middle of the day feels to me the most powerful. Also included is this. Now this is where things kind of break. There's a little bit of a language barrier with the breakdown for me. So this is what I assume, or what I understand to be like the school's classroom chalkboard with all sorts of writing on it. And this is the kind of thing that, I don't speak Japanese, so I'm only hypothesizing about what's on the board, but you can imagine just by doing a little bit of looking that maybe these 1 through 6 are like the class periods for the day, what they're going to be studying, things that they might have to learn, or important notices about maybe upcoming tests on here, and things that are never going to happen because they were interrupted. So these school pictures are especially interesting, powerful for me because it's like a childhood interrupted, a growth process interrupted, the school interrupted, the stable thing that most of us go through relatively uninterrupted from kindergarten through our senior year of high school has been interrupted in a very real way. And it also that aspect of someone having just stepped out, but they haven't really just stepped out. They're never coming back. There's another one of these life interrupted. And this is another area that really hits hard, is seeing calendars, which appear in a number of these photographs. Calendars of March 11 that have been left, 2011, I should say, which have been left on the wall. They all look like this, and they occur in the background of a variety of the photos that have been taken in this book. This one is just a up-close photograph of the calendar, and you can see there's stuff written on all of these days. Again, I don't read Japanese, so I don't know what's said here, but you have to imagine that people before this disaster had planned out their weeks ahead of them with things they were going to do, not knowing they were never going to get an opportunity to do that. So I find this section, we see stuff written on the board. This is just a really interesting photograph, and the calendars are also hard-hitting, and again, they appear in a wide variety of, here's another one, wide variety of photographs. We see it on the wall. Is it on this page? No, it's not on this page. There's two in this photograph though. There's one like behind the bar, one over here. So the calendar style must be popular, and you can see it over and over and over again. I think this is a really well done photography collection about a very important event. And they say a picture is worth 1,000 words. And I feel like the author really conveyed her concerns about what happens when we have disaster or human error mixed with nuclear power. The results are really, really life-changing. We've seen this with Chernobyl. We've also seen this very recently with Fukushima Daiichi. So you can write whatever books you want on this, but I feel like the photography for me, especially of the calendars and the schools, really show the magnitude of this event. And it was it wasn't a fun read, if that makes sense. It was an excellent read, but it wasn't an enjoyable read. It wasn't an enjoyable photography collection. It was one that really made me think though about the dangers of these forms of nuclear power, and that's a whole different discussion on the appropriateness of using that sort of power, which I'm not going to get into, but I feel like the author really conveys the danger of when nuclear power goes wrong and what the impacts on people's lives it can lead to. So I think the photography did more work than any 700-page book could do. That being said, I realize in reading this, or looking through / reading this photography collection, that I don't know as much as I should probably about this disaster. I've read a lot more about the Chernobyl incident, the Chernobyl disaster, than I did about one that occurred in my lifetime. I believe I was like in middle school when this happened, so this occurred within my lifetime, within my memory, and I still feel like I don't know as much about it. I'm really reaching. I feel like there was an earthquake, there was a tsunami, it overcame the flood walls, and that led to some sort of meltdown in the reactor. And I do remember some of the aftermath of the news from that, but I don't know as much as I feel like I should about this disaster. So this photography collection has inspired me to learn more about that disaster, maybe the factual side instead of the emotional side that a photography collection like this can show. So I have decided that I need to read a little bit more about it, and I have placed some holds with my local library to get more books on this disaster, to learn more about it and hopefully educate myself a little bit more on this important event that occurred within my lifetime. If you are looking for a photography collection that really conveys the gravity of a very important event such as this disaster, I would recommend Return to Fukushima by Rebecca Bathory. This was definitely a 5-star read. Not 5 stars because it was a fun, jaunty, enjoyable book, obviously, but I think it's a very important photography collection. And I think, again, that old proverb, I guess you can say, picture's worth 1,000 words, really does hold true in the case of this photography collection. I feel like this is an excellent example of that in action. So I'd highly recommend this photography collection to anyone who listened to this review and found any aspect of this interesting. That being said, I am on the hunt for good books on this nuclear disaster. I would love to get recommendations if you happen to read one that you felt like was very informative and you enjoyed. So please leave those in the comment section below. I'd love to receive comments. Otherwise, thank you so much for watching, and I hope you have a great rest of your day.